Let's return to This Week in America. Here's your host, Rick Bratton.
Welcome back, everybody, coast to coast. This Week in America. Growing Up in a Marriage Perfectly Flawed by Tina Parker is about how God can use the messiest of a person's mistakes for his glory. A book about how childhood traumas and issues, if not dealt with, can show its ugly head at the most inopportune of times. A book about accountability, standing exposed, being transparent, and owning your truth, all leading to God's healing and restoration. Tena is a native Texan, doctor of pharmacy by trade, the author of 3 other books, From Trial to Testimony, The Promise of Eden, Staying Joyfully Married, My Little Book of Whatnots, and Dear God, Thank You for Calling Me to the Carpet, A Wife's Prayer. Tena is a wife, mother, daughter, sister, and a friend. She also has recently started an outreach ministry called Life-Changers Ministry to help birth that which God has put inside of her. And Tina Parker, author of Growing Up in Marriage Perfectly Flawed, joins us on This Week in America. Hi, Tina. Welcome to the program. Great to have you with us.
Nice to be here, Rick. Thank you for the invitation.
It is our pleasure. Interesting book and exposing all of the flaws possibly in your life to help other people. Interesting. We're going to talk about that during the course of the program. What was the inspiration for the book? How did you decide, okay, I'm going to take what I've been through, write about it, and help other people?
Well, to be honest with you, it wasn't necessarily my idea. I went through a separation in October of 2019. And during that separation, I went through a plethora of emotions, ranging from anger, bitterness, grief, sadness, all of the above. But the one emotion that I just could not get away from was the anger. And so I remember praying one day and telling God I need you to get back at him. I need you to do this. I need you to do that. And it was like he said, before I attack him, let's take a look at you. And so that day I stood transparent, exposed in the mirror, looking at myself. And what that brought for me was I was able to address some issues that I didn't even realize were issues, from childhood pains, traumas, bitterness, isolations, rejections, neglect, all things that I had learned to sweep under the rug, not realizing that by not owning and addressing them, that they would eventually start to sift out from under that rug. And the consequences ended up sifting out in my marriage. That's how that came about.
That's interesting. Is that where a lot of this should start for most of us? We don't look within, we look outwardly and trying to blame other people, other things, other situations. And for you, what the healing process all started with that look within.
Exactly. I can't fix anybody else. I couldn't even fix me. Otherwise, I would have fixed me if I had known I was that broken. So with that being said, the only thing that I can control is how I respond. So by allowing God to heal me from the inside out, I would be of no use to anybody if I wasn't healed. If I was to go back into my marriage the same way, broken, hurt, vulnerable, insecure, I would have gotten the same exact results doing the same exact thing. So I knew something had to be changed. Something had to be different. Although I thought he was going to be my husband, but God flipped the script on me. So we're going to start with you.
The book is Growing Up in Marriage Perfectly Flawed by Tena L. Parker. Tena is T-E-N-A, Parker. Book available the usual places, Amazon, Walmart, the publisher Outskirts Press, and we'll have all this information on our website. How difficult is the transparency part of this balanced against honesty? I guess what I'm asking is, how important is it to be honest before you're transparent? Because it's difficult sometimes for us to be very honest about ourselves and the possible flaws that we have.
I'm glad you asked that, because I asked God the same question. And he said, how bad do you want your healing? So with that being said, for me, it was a matter of life and death. I had lived my entire life not addressing issues, not being strong enough to confront childhood traumas and pains. And unfortunately, by my not being able to confront them, I ended up hurting the one person that I had committed my life to. And so with that being said, I never wanted my choices to hurt somebody else. And when I saw that it did, that was also an inspiration for me. Okay, Tina, you're gonna have to do the work. And the work was hard. It was hard looking at myself. It was hard coming to some hard truths about things that I caused and some things that trickled down through generations. But all of that was really hard. And I have my first book. This book is the second book. And I teased God and I told him, I said, if you had made me write this book first, I wouldn't have wrote nothing else. Because that one was like childbearing pain.
Yes.
I could roll up in the bed and cry sometimes, reading the repercussions of my actions, looking at it was like I was reading third person because the little girl who was hurt on those pages, I didn't even realize that was me.
With us on the program is Tena Parker. The title of the book, fascinating, Growing Up in Marriage Perfectly Flawed. Tell me about the title, because that says so much as well.
A number doesn't make you mature. It just gives you an age. And when I met my husband, I think I was 28 years old, but it was throughout my marriage. At 28, you would think a person is kind of sound. I mean, I had my degree. I had done a whole lot of things, but emotionally and being able to connect my heart with somebody, I wasn't mature in that area. And fortunately, I had to grow up through all of that in my marriage. And it just, because I hadn't addressed things when I was younger or even knew I needed to. So my growing up, where it should have taken place before I got married, took place during the.
You know, it's interesting. I mentioned the book, Helping Other People, and reading reviews. You are helping other people. What was the goal when you sat down to write this? Was it helping other people? Was it part, self-help therapy that you were going through to address these issues? What was the goal in writing the book, Growing Up in Marriage?
I didn't have a goal, Rick, honestly, because I was so broken and I was so hurt and I was so guarded. My heart was so guarded. Me writing, that was healing and restoration for me because I allowed God to minister to me and through me to where I was able to write down what was going on inside of me. And to be honest with you, my intention was to just give the book to my immediate family, when I died. But as I was writing more and more, actually my third book, this Saying Joyfully Married, I didn't want to share this because it's too transparent, it's too honest, and I didn't want people looking at me funny, sideways, crooked ways because they,
No, exactly.
all that I've been through. And I told God, I said, you got jokes, yeah, because how can I tell somebody how to stay joyfully married when I'm not? I'm separated. And he said, you may not can tell them what to do, but you can tell them what not to do. And that's where the subtitle, my little book of what nots, came. So my thing is, I'm working through my wounds, but as I heal and get restored, I'm reaching back trying to pull others up because if God did it for me, he can do it for you. He is no respecter of persons, and the same grace that covers me, it can also cover you. I'm an average person. It's nothing special about me except I love God and I trust him, and I'm trying to be obedient by sharing my story.
With us on the program is Tena Parker. The name of the book is Growing Up in Marriage Perfectly Flawed, available again at Amazon, Walmart.com, the publisher Outskirts Press, and information, and you can link on to her Amazon page by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. What is the overall message of the book, would you say? Or maybe it's plural, maybe overall messages of the book?
Well, for me, the message of this book, because it was so hard to write, because it was hard to see myself in those pages, it was almost like I was looking at a fictional character. I never saw myself as being that broken or being that insecure or vulnerable or having consequences from being neglected or rejected or bullied. I never saw none of that. But as I was writing through the book, the overall message for me that helped me put my shoulders back and stand tall, knowing that the God in me loves me regardless of what I go through. You have to always stand exposed in your truth. You got to always be willing to stand transparent. It doesn't matter if you're at fault or not. Being transparent, it builds up integrity. And that's the whole thing. But you got to be exposed, you got to be willing to be transparent, and you got to learn how to stand in your truth. And no matter where you are on your journey, God will meet you there, because he met me in the valleys and the shadows of death. I felt like I was at my lowest of lows, and he met me there.
The book is doing so well. It's resonating so well because it's relatable. You tell us who Tena is, what you went through, and people are going sort of a self-examination as they're reading your story. And these are your experiences. This is not a sociologist who has never lived these but read about them in a textbook and is relaying that information. This is what you actually went through. Where did these experiences come from?
Just over the course of my life, I never considered myself to live. I always considered myself to be an average, quote unquote, person, as far as not really doing too much, not, but as I began to write, I was like, okay, God, I'm a little more messed up than I thought.
We all could say that. Trust me. We all could say that.
Okay. I'm like, wow, you had me birth out all these books in 2020. All 4 of these books got birthed, and I'm like, wow, I must have been really messed up.
Well, let's talk about that. The first book, tell me about the background on that. And because you said you're sort of introverted, at least in talking about your problems. You're not big on social media, although God has directed you to use your writing as sort of a platform for social media. What was that first book like for you to go through the process of writing and sharing your thoughts and experiences?
I'm going to be honest with you. That first book, God gave me the title about 10 years ago, and I didn't really know what to do with it because I'm not a writer. That's just nothing I aspired to ever do. But as I used to write down my dreams. And when I got separated from my husband, we relocated to 2 separate cities. I had a whole lot of time on my hands. So in my mind, I said, let me get these notes together. Let me compile it together and try to get it in order. And the more it was like I was reading somebody else's book, because I'm like, wow, this happened. God, you did that. You did this. But the first book is about faith. It's about faith. And so I was like, okay, that was good. That was good. And again, that was a book only for immediate family. I wasn't trying to publish it and, promote it or do any of that. But that second book, that's the birthing book. But that first book is about faith. And the only way to have faith, without faith, is impossible to please God. So he was teaching me how to rely solely on him, me not knowing what I would go through years later. And I would have nothing but my faith to stand on.
Tena Parker, our guest. That's, if you're Googling, Tena Parker. The book is Growing Up in Marriage Perfectly Flawed. You'll find it at Amazon, at Walmart, at the publisher Outskirts Press as well. So now you're a published author. Did you ever think that you were going to end up, not just with that first book and thinking maybe I'll have this or family and friends later in my life, but suddenly you're a published author, you go to Amazon, you look up your name, and you've got your books there. What's it like, and did you ever think you'd be a published author?
I started crying. I never, like I said, my trade, I'm a doctor of pharmacy. That's what I went to school for. That's what I've been doing since, for the past 20 years. So I never saw myself writing, but to have the manifestation of something that was happening in me and my experiences birth to where I could physically hold it, that was such a humbling experience for me. And I can't even put it into words. And I'm like, God, you did that. You used me to do that. And don't get me wrong, the experiences I truly take responsibility for, because I did all of that stuff. But God somehow worked it out and through me to where it's relatable to people. And so that it still leaves me in awe.
How does this book compare to the others? And I ask that because this book, you really Expose yourself. We see who you are. And by seeing who you are, we go through that self-introspection just like you did, and we see flaws in us. How does this book compare to the others?
Well, the third book, like I said, Staying Joyfully Married, my little book of what nots, basically what not to do in order to stay joyfully married. And then the fourth book is called Dear God, Thank You for Calling Me to the Carpet, A Wife's Prayer. And I was joking around one day. I have, a quirky sense of humor. And I was like, oh, God, you should have let me write this Dear God one first. And I got convicted. And he was like, no, you needed to write Growing Up in Marriage first. Because if I had called you to the carpet the first time, you wouldn't have been able to accept my chastisement. You wouldn't have been able to accept or receive my discipline, knowing that it was all in love. You wouldn't have been able to allow being broken gracefully. You would have just been emotional and probably would have threw in the towel. But I had to break you gracefully first. And then the third book, now since I've broken you and you're trying to heal and restore, tell others what you did so they won't do. Share your story about that. And then the fourth book is actually a black book. It's a little black book. And back in the day, we all had probably a little black book with numbers in it, with certain specifications that you could call a person and just hang out or whatever it was.
Yes.
But this little black book, God said, there's only one number in there. There's only one name, and that's mine, because I can fulfill all your needs. And all you need is just that one name. So now you write me a love letter, because now you see it was my grace that covered you from then to now.
Tena Parker, our guest. Boy, time is going by so quickly. You've described this as a book of choices, and I want to take just a couple of minutes here to talk about the importance of choices and understanding there are choices, because with choices come consequences. Do we sometimes make choices and do it maybe without giving it a whole lot of thought, the proper amount of thought?
Absolutely we do, because we have this shell of our being called flesh. And our flesh sometimes want what it wants, when it wanted, from whoever it wanted. But that's when you need to kill the flesh. That's why the word says you kill the flesh daily so that the spirit can live and rise up in you. The spirit is our helper, our comforter, our paraclete to help guide us through life. Now, if you're not in connection with your spirit, or if you don't even believe in God, then this probably ain't going to be for you. However, when I make a choice, I try to think of every angle. Who does it involve? Who could it possibly involve that negatively, that it doesn't have to, impact that way. So yes, choices do make a difference. Choices absolutely make a difference. But as I'm learning and as I'm growing in God's word, as opposed to my flesh being spontaneous, jumping in, making choices, I try to sit back and be like, okay, God, what should I do? Because I've wasted a lot of time already and I ain't got much time left. I'm like at the halfway point of my life. So I ain't got no time to be making no bad choices. I got too much at stake. But for God to trust me with the assignment that he's given me, I can't disappoint him. So yeah, I do have to think about my choices because they don't just affect me. They affect my Father. And I want to be the apple of his eye.
The book is by Tena Parker. The book is Growing Up in Marriage Perfectly Flawed. Just about out of time. Is there like maybe one little pearl, one little a gem of wisdom that you can sort of leave us with? And whatever Tena tells us and much more will be in the book, Growing Up in Marriage, excellent reviewed book. The book available, again, basically everywhere. I'll mention that in a second. But any little pearl that you can share with us to wrap up the interview?
Absolutely. And if you'll allow me, I just have two pearls and I will not take up more of your time.
No, take your time.
But the first little pearl is actually in Acts 20, verse 24. And it says, but my life is not worth nothing to me unless I use it for finishing the work assigned me by the Lord Jesus, the work of telling others the good news about the wonderful grace of God. And that's the only thing that has brought me this far. Is God's grace. That's my message. If he did it for me, he can do it for you. And the second scripture is actually found in Matthew chapter 5, verse 48. And I thought this was so befitting. When I read this was after the book. This was like months after the book when I found this scripture. And I'm just like, God, you are so amazing to me. Because Matthew 5:48 says, in a word, what I'm saying is grow up. Your kingdom subjects. Now live like it. Live out your God-created identity. Live generously and graciously toward others, the way God lives towards you. So those are two scriptures definitely that are befitting for this book. But I'm just here to tell and to share God's grace is sufficient for whatever you're going through, whatever choices you've made. He can cover that. The blood covers that already. So just don't give up on God, because he has not given up on you.
Are you working on another book? You do this well. I hope you know that. You do very well in writing these books and helping people. Are you working on another one?
Actually, I am working on number 5, and it actually 5 is in spirituality. It represents the number of grace, and actually the book is about grace and how God has given me grace throughout throughout my whole life, and and I also have a children's book that I'm hoping to be completed by the summer. And then the 7th book, which is the number of completion, should be done by the end of the year. I'm almost finished editing that.
A lot that we can talk about in the future. I like that. You're doing so much good work out there in spreading the word and helping people and sharing your message, and delighted to hear that you're going to continue doing that. Our guest on the program is Tena Parker. Tena is Tena Parker, Tena L. Parker. If you're Googling, the book available at Amazon, Walmart.com, published by Outskirts Press, and all this information on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. This book we're talking about in particular, Growing Up in Marriage Perfectly Flawed. Tena, a pleasure having you on the program. Hopefully we can do this again. Great job on the program today. Great job with the books. Thank you for joining us.
I appreciate the invite. I'm so humbled, and I pray your Godspeed, because you are opening up doors for us to be able to share the good news of the God that we serve.
Well, you're bringing the good news, and we're happy to be the platform for that. It's Tena Parker, our guest on the program, Growing Up in Marriage, Perfectly Flawed. All the information on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Back on today's program after these messages.
This Week in America is online. You can visit our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Scott Pinkerton, Associate Producer of This Week in America. Jay Anderson, Segment Producer. Ben Watson, Webmaster. Otto Bechet, Director of Engineering and TV Production. This Week in America produced and is a trademark of Blue Funk Broadcasting, LLC. For information on all of our guests and to listen to this week's show, our website again at thisweekinamerica.us. And I'm Sean Bratton, Executive Producer of This Week in America.